Welcome to Space Podcast 3000, a Futurama retrospective podcast. I guess to start off with, we should probably introduce ourselves.
I'm Eden, also known as Evie, and I'm the youngest of the group at age 22, so I didn't really grow up with Futurama. I only watched it a few years ago on Netflix.
I'm Test Zero. You may also know me as Doug. I am 35, and I remember watching this show first run through like all three of its revivals. And I've always felt that Futurama is an exceptionally smart and clever show, way more than like even The Simpsons was at the time. And this first started during the 10th season, so. But that's getting into later later stuff to discuss. But yeah, I'm very excited to be going over this series once again and be able to discuss it.
Yeah, so out of the three of us, you have not only the most experience with podcasts, but you've also got the longest history with the show. As for me, hi, I'm Nova. I'm 28 years old. I'm a transgender woman. I wasn't really old enough to be watching this while it was airing. I wasn't even really watching The Simpsons at the time, but, once it was in syndication on Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, I was definitely watching it, caught a couple episodes, and started, recording it, watching it religiously with my younger brother. But not sure how I'm going to feel about it now going back. So without further ado, let's get right into it. New Year's Eve, 1999, the dawn of a new millennium. While delivering a pizza to a cryogenics facility, delivery boy Philip J. Fry accidentally falls into a freezer, where he remains for 1,000 years. New Year's Eve, 2999, the dawn of a new millennium. Philip Fry awakens to discover a brand new world. After meeting the lovely Cyclops alien Taranga Leela, Fry is assigned a new permanent career. Delivery boy. Unwilling to accept the same dead-end life he left behind in the 20th century, and terrified of the needle gun that will be used to implant his career chip, Fry flees onto the streets of New York City, where he meets and befriends an alcoholic robot named Bender. After Leela, with police backup, tracks them down, man and robot flee underground into the decaying ruins of old New York. And there, surrounded by the remains of everything he once knew, the reality of Fry's situation comes crashing down upon him. As Leela finds them once again, they confide in one another, Leela confessing that she was abandoned by her parents as a baby and has never met another alien like herself. The duo, 20th century man and one-eyed alien, are kindred spirits in their loneliness. Leela, realizing how much she hates her own job, decides to quit. The three of them, now unemployed and marked for execution for the crime of job desertion, seek sanctuary with Fry's only living relative, his great-great-great, etc. nephew, the elderly Professor Hubert Farnsworth. But when the police arrive at the door, the group boards the professor's spaceship. With Leela at the helm and under cover of the New Year's fireworks, the group makes good their escape. As the new year begins, the professor offers Fry, Leela, and Bender a job. As it so happens, he is in need of a crew for his intergalactic package delivery company. The year 3000 has arrived, and delivery boy Philip J. Fry can't wait to get to work. Alright, so I guess starting the episode at the very beginning with, Fry losing at this arcade game, getting insulted by a kid, and it just it's such a great way to open the show because it just immediately sets him up as this pathetic loser.
Which is this show really is great at just painting this perfect picture of just somebody who has absolutely nothing going for him in his life. And yeah, he does suck at Monkey Fracas Jr. He's trying to show how the game is played, and he's like, and then the boss comes and you can't beat the boss. I'm like, you really do suck at this game. Not only does he suck, but he doesn't realize that he sucks. He thinks he's good enough to teach someone else how to play the game.
Absolutely. And then the joke just compounds when his girlfriend shows up and just casually breaks up with him while she's sitting next to this other guy.
And he doesn't even realize it.
And she just yells at him that, I left your stuff out on the sidewalk. Like, she's not even waiting for him to come pick it up. She just dumped it out where anyone can steal it. And it just compounds, and then this is immediately followed by the background joke of his bike getting stolen. It's a very Simpsons-esque joke construction.
And the thing on the pizza saying, do not tip delivery boy.
Yeah, you can definitely see the DNA of the Simpsons in this show, just with the very Simpsons-esque construction of the joke, just taking the core gag of this pathetic loser.
It really is just layered with joke after joke after joke in this, just visual everything.
Yes, exactly, just bringing every possible punchline out of the premise.
And this was, like I mentioned before, the Futurama was started during season 10 of The Simpsons, way before it started to get stagnant. Like, season 10 was still pretty strong for The Simpsons, I would say.
What are you talking about getting stagnant? The Simpsons was canceled after 10 seasons. And, like, again, you can still see the very Simpsons-esque style joke construction later on when you have Leela calling into the cops using the code name
1BDI.
And then this is immediately followed by the cops standing right behind her and saying, we'll be there in 5 minutes. Just the two rapid-fire punchlines.
Yeah, definitely a lot of, snarky social commentary, which is very much, in this kind of genre, I guess you could call it, of show.
Yeah, well, this very much is a genre. This is adult animation, I guess you would call it, without getting into the terms of adult usually meaning pornographic. But this is adult animation. This is like Family Guy. This is like The Simpsons. This is like South Park. This is like Bob's Burgers. This is like any one of those shows that it's animated because that's just the best way to do these kind of jokes.
Though some are better at it than others.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, although I do want to point out that, like, even though you have all of this Simpsons-style humor and even the cameo of the three-eyed fish from The Simpsons, you then have stuff like the suicide booth, which is a weirdly dark joke, even by the standards of a Matt Groening show.
Yeah, he really did kind of start this probably because he was a bit fed up with how just kind of The Simpsons had sort of become its own sort of pillar, and you can't really buck the trend. It's kind of like it's kind of like with Disney, they can't really let Mickey Mouse be any kind of thing like that's kind of dark or edgy. Mickey Mouse has to always be just kind of this perfect. You can't change things too much with Mickey Mouse, so you do things with something else, and that's probably where a lot of the seeds of this series started. Where it's like, I want to do something different, something that I'm not tethered to trying to keep to a formula or trying to make sure that it pulls a profit or make sure that it's always this kind of character or this kind of positive thing. I want to do something that's a bit more risky, that's a bit more edgy, a bit darker, and so that's where Futurama came from, and later, of course, Disenchantment. Or Disenchantment, what was it? Yeah, Disenchantment, which was also very much feels like early Futurama.
I mean, I have issues with Disenchantment.
Yeah, I watched the first season.
Yeah, Disenchantment I didn't think was all that great, but that's for another time. But, like, yeah, the point that, like, you have the suicide booth, and that just immediately sets the show apart from The Simpsons. And, like, even in that gag, that's another multi-layered joke where you have, Bender showing up and he does that string thing with the coin to just get his quarterback.
Which is like such a that's like a 1950s thing that you would do. and he's doing it in $29.99.
I don't know, what I found particularly great about that joke is he's getting his quarterback even though he's here to commit suicide. He's going to be dead in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Why do you need your quarterback? You're not going to be able to use it.
There are traditions of putting coins on people's eyes when they're dead, but that's neither here or there.
No. No, he's not trying to pay Sharon. No. I like the bit that Fry is just so engrossed in, like, looking at his paper and looking up that he doesn't even realize that the guy before him didn't even come out of the booth.
Speaking of the really good jokes in the show, you also have stuff like that, the automatic door gag where Fry comments that, oh, just like Star Trek, and then it closes on him.
Bonk.
And that's even funnier if you have some background knowledge about the production of the original Star Trek, because the tech for automatic doors, while it existed in 1966, it was not really consumer level. It wasn't very common.
No, it was just a guy with a rope.
Yeah, they were all operated by hand, and the actors had to trust the operator would get the timing right. And they did occasionally walk into the doors or have the doors close on them. So, like, seeing that this happens to Fry, it's doubly funny when you're aware of that. Because, yes, it is just like in Star Trek.
It was like, yeah, even in the future, nothing works.
Are modern day automatic doors any better, though?
I have never walked into an automatic door. Like, not because it didn't. If I ever did, it was because it was locked or something, not because it just didn't open in time. I have never had that problem with automatic doors, honestly.
Oh my god, I'm sorry. The joke of Bender reattaching both of his fallen arms on his own, and Fry just immediately being like, I don't know how you did that. That is probably my favorite joke in the episode. It is just so... It's weird that this episode aired in 1999, because that is a joke that would not...
That is very much a more modern kind of joke. Yeah, more modern meta humor.
Yeah, exactly. That is a very 21st century internet joke. And, oh god, the minor thing, but also the background gag of Bender literally shitting a brick.
Yeah.
That was such a dumb joke. I mean, of course, they hit it later on, even harder in a later episode, but... And to talk about Bender's portrayal in this episode, I mean, one thing that does stand out to me is knowing what we know about Bender in the later parts of the series. Why would he care about suicide booths?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why would he care that, like, because that was his motivation to killing himself when they found out that the girders that he was bending ended up being put into use in suicide booths. And he's like, I couldn't live with myself after I figured that out. I was like, why would you care about what happens to meat bags? He literally calls them meat bags in this episode.
Yeah, like later Bender does not give a crap about people's lives and is even a murderer himself.
He could be flat out lying and just be making a sob story.
I guess, but then what would his motivation be to kill himself? It raises... To borrow a page out of Hermes from a later episode, that just raises further questions.
Shits and giggles?
I would honestly see that as a more interesting motivation. Like, he goes into the suicide booth to try to survive it. Like, why not? That seems the kind of thing he would do. Just to feel the thrill of trying to be killed.
Although, actually, speaking of weird continuity stuff with Bender, like, in this episode, when Fry asks him why he's drinking, and his response is, I don't need to drink, I can quit anytime I want to, and then later continuity establishes that he's literally powered by alcohol.
Yeah, alcohol charges his fuel cells. I mean, like, that, he should have kind of explained that. I mean, you can sort of assume that they just hadn't put that part of continuity into the series yet, because I don't think they do anything with the career chips really in the future either.
It comes up a couple times, but I mean, to be fair, this is kind of standard stuff for like first episodes.
For a lot of pilots, yeah. They introduce things that just never end up going anywhere. But they do introduce a lot of stuff that became series staples, like the heads in the jars, quote unquote friendly robots, transportation tubes going through, just the kind of the jaded New Yorkness of everybody, although like that can kind of be assumed anywhere. I'm
sorry, can we just rewind to the Head Museum for a second? Because that is such a freaking cool concept, because it lets them have all these celebrity cameos despite it being 1,000 years in the future.
Yeah, that is an awesome idea.
Hell, Matt Groening himself is even seen in the Head Museum in one of the background jokes.
It's like the Frozen Disney joke, but taken to another level.
Yeah, Disney's Frozen Head. See, when you say Frozen Disney, I think of something else. Elsa's head in the back right there.
There are just so many great background gags in this episode. Like, you already mentioned the do not tip delivery boy joke on the pizza box. But also stuff like, did you notice the newspaper headline, Doomsayers Cautiously Upbeat? Or, hell, even the door of the cryogenics lab where it says no power failures since 1997, with the 7 clearly added as a post-it note.
And a lot of these jokes, sometimes you don't think that they really meant anything by it. They're just coming up with a joke, but later on it does actually come into play.
Yeah, but, like, that doesn't make the actual gag any less funny.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just think, like, what would be a funny joke to have here? It's like, no power failure since whatever.
That's one thing that's good about coming back to these shows, is gags that you may have missed or not understood before. You notice more things.
Exactly, yeah.
So, like, either of you have any? That's about all I wanted to bring up on the subject of the really good jokes here. Either of you have anything else?
There's a lot of things that just like the attention to detail from the writers. December 31st, 2099 is on a Tuesday.
Really? Was it?
Yeah, when they go into the head museum, it's like, let's hide in here. It's free on Tuesdays. I'm like, yeah, December 31st, 2099 will be a Tuesday.
I mean, I do know that the writers at one point joked that they were the most overqualified cartoon writing staff ever, just from the sheer number of doctorates between them.
And even the ship, the ship that he has, which I think is kind of a double-layered joke. The fact that Farnsworth, he just kind of glosses over the fact that he has this intergalactic spaceship, and he doesn't really care about it, and then he just goes back to talking about his links of wires. That's sort of the fact that, yeah, Farnsworth is already kind of weird, but also space travel is just kind of an accepted form of transportation in this universe. It's like, he mentions that he has an intergalactic spaceship, but it's like, oh yeah, that's my car. So it's like, okay.
That was a well-organized drawer of wire, though.
Yeah, because, the problem with science fiction is it all eventually turns into science fact.
In theory.
In theory, although on that note, I do want to go back to the career chip thing, because it's been said that all good science fiction is as much about the present as it is the future.
Right.
And that is a really good example, because we're already seeing in the early 21st century that how career options are already extremely limited by things like class, education, even social connections.
Or just even down to the fact that so many things are being automated that just like general labor is not being needed. In fact, that was one of the main plot points of a book I wrote a couple of years ago, that just like there were no jobs for regular people, and they revolted against the upper class and killed them all.
Are we ever going to see that book published, by the way?
It's the rest of it is not very good. I need to I may reintegrate the idea into something else, but it's something.
That's valid. But when you take all of these ideas and extrapolate them, the idea of outright career assignment is almost a logical, albeit greatly exaggerated, conclusion to where late-stage capitalism is already headed.
Yeah, and if we jump ahead to the end, while Fry still ends up as a delivery boy, he's excited because, he chooses this path.
Yeah, he chooses to be that's actually a really good point. And it's not because he was a delivery boy for pizza, but here he's going to be a delivery boy in an intergalactic spaceship, which, I mean, you can call it being a delivery boy, but it's still doing something that's way more interesting than just going around this 10-block area that Panucci's Pizza probably served.
Yeah, but I get the idea of what Eden was getting at, that instead of it being forced on him, in this case, it's something that he is accepting willingly and choosing that, yeah, I'm okay doing this, which does make a pretty big difference, I think.
Yeah, it does. Another thing I noticed is that even the intergalactic spaceship has the graining overbite. It has that big jaw and the jaw coming down the bottom.
Yeah, although we should probably mention, as good as this episode was, I'm not going to say this was one of the best episodes of the show, but it was a really solid start.
Oh yeah, this in a lot of cases the pilots they really are kind of a microcosm of the kind of jokes that they would have for this series. In many cases, the pilot is not even actually aired. It's just the one that's shown to companies in order to try to make it into a complete series. But in some cases, it's just it's not even necessarily the first episode. In this case, it was. It's the first episode. It sets the premise. It shows what the show is going to potentially be about. But yeah, there were a bunch of jokes that didn't quite fit, and it wasn't really even about anything. It just kind of, because it did have a lot to go through. It did have a lot that it had to go through because there was so much to set up with the series.
Yeah, they had to set up the characters and the world and everything, which continues a bit into the next episode. But what you were talking about, a microcosm of the show as a whole, that does also include some of the jokes here that didn't land, especially the ones that are really dated, the cringy when Bender's I don't want anyone thinking we're robosexuals. I know this aired in 1999, but still, even back then, that was kind of...
And of course, a later episode does actually go into that and go into robosexual marriage. So maybe they thought that they were being a bit more progressive at that point, because that was from one of the later seasons as well.
I guess, but even just as a lame pun, it's just Yeah, it was not a good joke. And I'm also going to like bring up the fact that we had jokes about police brutality are a lot less funny in 2021.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do like the visual gag that they look like lightsabers, but they're just regular police batons. I like that idea, like this the visual gag that looks like it's going to cut him, but it's just a police baton. But the actual premise of the joke, the premise itself is like, yeah. And if you do remove it from that, it's just kind of, they're police, they beating him up, okay. And they call it going 24th century on his ass, which is, yeah, you don't need to wait that long.
I mean, considering how things are going, I'd hate to see the 24th century.
Well, by the 23rd century, we should have first contact with the Vulcans.
Yeah, just the thing about the police officer joke that gets me is the cop remarks that their job as peace officers is to get violent. It kind of reveals that on some level, people always knew this was a problem.
Yeah, that is an interesting way of looking at it. It's like they kind of knew that the police were always kind of dicks, but it was played as a joke, which is like it would be funny if it weren't so true now. It's like, they're violent, haha, but it's like, no, that's not a thing that should be accepted or joked about anymore.
I mean, if you look at the establishment of police, they've never been about protecting people. It's always been about protecting property and not the people.
Yeah, exactly. Police exist to serve the status quo, not the citizenry, but that might be getting a bit too blatantly political for here. But back on topic, there's actually some interesting little things in this episode that aren't really good or bad. Like, a bit of trivia, there was actually a line that got redubbed in this episode.
Which one was that?
So the bit with the passenger in the tubes where, Fry first sees this, who speaks out his destination then gets sucked through. In the initial airing and the first rerun, his destination was JFK Jr. Memorial Airport. And then JFK Jr. died in a plane crash.
Yeah, I can see that. And in this one is Radio City Mutant Hall, which I think is a bit more of a timeless joke anyway.
It's a better joke, but you can see how it doesn't quite match the lip flaps if you pay close attention. But, like, even beyond that, I actually have a couple of other little niggling issues with this episode. Like, the New Year's countdown scene, which has people all over the world counting down.
Including aliens.
Well, even just at the beginning of the episode, yeah, it's repeated at the end of the episode, making it even weirder, but it's like, from the start, it didn't make sense, because you have to consider the existence of time zones.
Yeah, time zones are all, and of course, like, it cuts back to Earth, and they're all counting one, which, no, they wouldn't all be counting one at the time anyway, but it's like, yeah, they're trying to kind of put forth the idea of unity, which is always a good idea.
I guess it raises too many questions. And then there's also the issue with, Fry getting frozen in the cryotube at exactly midnight, and it reads 1,000 years. So shouldn't he defrost at exactly midnight on New Year's Eve, rather than a few hours earlier?
I think, it is one of those dials, so it's probably not perfectly accurate.
Maybe. I don't know, it's just weird. It's one of those things that I noticed immediately.
Yeah, it's more for the gag than accuracy,
I guess. And then there's also a bit near the end of the episode where there's a shot where you can see Leela's, like, face seen from straight on, and it just looks incredibly weird. Like, these characters were clearly designed to only really be viewed in 3/4 perspective.
3/4 or sideways. Yeah, that happens with a lot of Simpsons stuff. Isn't there, like, a Twitter account where, like, Simpsons faces, like, straight on or something?
I think so. I'm not sure about that. Can our listeners please let us know? Send a link to, I don't know. Take the link and just do nothing with it, I guess.
Add us on Twitter. Yeah. You have to create a Twitter account for the podcast.
Some interesting little continuity bits in this episode, even just beyond that aren't necessarily errors. I don't know if you guys noticed, but, like, the old career chips of the previous crew, which he dumps out of an envelope labeled contents of Space Wasp's stomach. And then I think in season 4, was it, where we would later run with this with the Space Bees?
Which is, if that's the episode I'm thinking of, that's actually a really, really good episode.
Probably one of the best, but, like, my point is that that's the episode where we see the remains of the previous crew. So the whole contents of Space Wasp's stomach thing can almost count as foreshadowing.
Yeah, there's a lot of foreshadowing this, which you do see that a lot in the other Groening stuff. He would have ideas that they don't end up doing anything with. Like, everybody knows this, a lot of people, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people know the story about Marge's hair. How originally hid the rabbit ears, which was a concept that they never ended up doing anything with, but they had the idea at the time, so... Which I think is actually a really cool way of writing stories that may potentially have retroactive continuity. Because then if you don't do anything with it, at least you had the idea. If you do something with it, you had the idea ahead of time. So you're just like laying all these seeds that you can do something with it or not. It's also the idea that Homer and Krusty were the same person, which is why they have such similar designs. But again, they don't end up doing anything with it. So, and of course, the later episode of The Simpsons with where he goes to clown college, that kind of played on that whole joke.
Well, it was clearly a one-off gag here. It just, they must have run with it later. But like, there was also the intentional thing.
Oh yeah, totally. With Nibbler hiding under the shadow.
Yeah, like, I think they said they didn't know exactly what they wanted to do, but they wanted there to always be something more to the circumstances of Fry ending up in the future.
Right.
So I guess that was put there.
So you just kind of added that little silhouette. I'm sure they didn't even finalize Nibbler's design at the time. They just kind of had that silhouette there with the stalk, which could have really been anything.
Yeah, it just kind of looks like a blob with a little stalk. But, yeah, that's about all that I wanted to bring up. Gone through sort of all my notes. What about you guys?
They always have these great ideas where they have like a different random joke in each intro. And like when this one is just Futurama in color. I don't know why I find that one so funny. It's like, yeah, well, duh, it's in color. I know that's a throwback to like the 1950s when not every show was in color. And it was like one of the big selling points of having a series like that. But even that joke was like old back in the 80s.
So I guess that's the first episode of Futurama and the start of this whole podcast. I apologize for this production being a complete mess, but, hopefully we'll be able to figure out the kinks as we go.
It's a shaky first episode, both for them and for us.
It's a process. Thank you for listening to Space Podcast 3000. Your three voices of the future are Nova Altman, Doug Hancox, and Eden Valerie. The theme music is Voxel Revolution by Kevin MacLeod, licensed from filmmusic.io. Find it and hundreds of other free songs at incompetech.filmmusic.io. You can hear more episodes of Space Podcast 3000 on YouTube or at soundcloud.com/SpacePod3K. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/SpacePod3K. Be sure to join us next time as the Planet Express crew rockets to the moon in The Series Has Landed.